And Beatrice are very, very similar to their parents, really wanting cash, all about trading in off their royal titles. They've been raised with extreme privilege. They have no idea what it's like to be a normal person in this country. So I don't feel sorry for them because they've had everything gifted to them. And as I say, from everything I've seen of them myself and everything I've heard from people around them, they desperately are driven by how high they can get in society and how much money they can make.
But you might say they were as high as it can get in society. I mean, the Queen's actual granddaughters doesn't get much higher than that. So you might have thought they wouldn't need to curry favour, they wouldn't need to kowtow to anyone, they wouldn't need to do any of that sort of thing because it would happen to them, not from them, and that they were already on the sort of cusp of all things that this earth can offer, you know, tickets to anything you want to see, flights to anywhere in the world, wonderful mansions to go and stay at, you know, all that kind of thing. So when you say your friends and contacts in the world of showbiz and in that sort of royal orbit, say they were, as I think I'm paraphrasing you correctly, sort of out for what they could get.
Yes.
What were they trying to get? What more did they need to get?
So it's a sense of entitlement, which we heard with Fergie as well. So, for example, they may go to Selfridges on a shopping spree and leave without paying because they think, well, I don't need to pay. I'm a royal. Harry and William never have that same attitude. And there's still a hierarchy. They're very privileged, these girls, but they're not the elite part of the royal family. So it's a case of going to a nightclub, we're going to order loads of drinks for our 15 friends, and we're going to leave without paying the bill. That sense of entitlement, that's where they've gone wrong.
And you know for a fact that they behave like
100%.
that? 100%?
Yes.
No question about it?
No questions. When I was a young showbiz journo, I would go to clubs in Chelsea and West London, following Prince Harry around. That was my beat, was to follow Harry.
Right.
I'd observe Harry and his friends, and they were not particularly well behaved.
Yeah, boisterous.
They're boisterous, but they weren't rude and they weren't as entitled as their cousins were.
Really, that's very interesting because I haven't actually heard anybody quite say it exactly like that before.
JJ's revelations about royal surveillance and the York princesses. JJ's recent comments have pulled back the curtain on both the York sisters and the media's invasive tactics during Harry's youth, offering a fascinating glimpse into the machinery that shaped so much of the royal narrative we've consumed over the years. He's gone on record stating that he knows for a fact that Beatrice and Eugenie are cut from the same cloth as their parents, greedy, social climbing and dripping with entitlement. Though he does concede that Beatrice seems to have absorbed the worst of Andrew's business wheeling and dealing, while Eugenie appears to have had the good sense to distance herself from that particular cesspool for some time now. But what's perhaps most striking is JJ's casual admission that, as a young reporter, he was explicitly tasked with tailing Prince Harry, shadowing him to nightclubs and tracking his every move like some sort of state-sanctioned stalker. Harry, of course, always maintained that he could feel eyes on him, that gnawing sense of being watched. And here we have JJ, years later, with the kind of retrospective honesty that comes when there's nothing left to lose, confirming that Harry's instincts were spot on. It's a chilling validation, really, and it underscores just how right Harry has been about so many things, even when the narrative machine worked overtime to paint him as paranoid or oversensitive. JJ's damning assessment of the York princesses. JJ doesn't mince words when it comes to Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, claiming he knows for a fact that both are cut from the same cloth as their parents, greedy, entitled, and forever climbing the social ladder. According to him, the York sisters have inherited the worst tendencies of their family line, carrying forward patterns of behaviour that have long defined the Duke and Duchess's approach to royal life and business dealings. He paints them as products of their upbringing, suggesting that years of watching Andrew and Sarah navigate their controversial paths have left an indelible mark on how the princesses conduct themselves. While some might argue that Eugenie has attempted to carve out a more independent identity, distancing herself from the tabloid fodder world her parents inhabited, JJ's assessment suggests that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and that both sisters, whether consciously or not, embody the same acquisitive, status-obsessed mindset that has made their parents such polarizing figures within and beyond palace walls. Royal inheritance. When bad habits run in the family. While I do believe Beatrice has picked up a lot of bad behaviours from her father, particularly through the business route, it's rather telling how these patterns emerge across generations. She's adopted some of Andrew's more questionable business practices, the sort of entitled wheeling and dealing that blurs ethical lines and trades heavily on royal connections. In her own professional ventures, there's that same air of expectation, that sense that doors should simply open because of who she is, rather than what she's actually bringing to the table. It's the Andrew playbook, really, just with a younger face and perhaps slightly more polish. The troubling bit is watching her demonstrate those similar entitled attitudes in real time, seemingly unable to recognise how closely she's following her father's problematic example. Whether it's the business dealings or simply the general approach to navigating her position, there's an uncomfortable echo there. Proof that spending your formative years watching someone operate in a certain way leaves its mark, even when that way is precisely what landed your father in the mess he's in now. Eugenie's different path. While JJ's blanket condemnation lumps both sisters together as carbon copies of their grasping social climbing parents, the reality appears far more nuanced when it comes to Eugenie. She seems to have been quietly distancing herself from the family's more problematic world for some time now, carefully extricating herself from the entitled behaviours that have become synonymous with the York name. This suggests a genuine divergence from Beatrice's trajectory, where her older sister has seemingly embraced the business connections and dubious associations that defined their father's post-royal career. Eugenie appears to be charting a different course altogether, one that rejects the very entitlement JJ so confidently ascribes to her. JJ's candid confession. Admitting to years of tracking. Prince Harry, JJ didn't hold back when he confirmed what many had long suspected. As a young reporter, he was explicitly tasked with following Prince Harry, and he did so with disturbing regularity. He admitted to tracking Harry to nightclubs and social venues, essentially making the young prince's every move fair game for tabloid fodder. It's a chilling validation of what Harry has said for years. That gnawing feeling of being watched, that sense of eyes always on him, wasn't paranoia. It was reality. JJ's participation in these invasive journalism practices is yet another example of the media's relentless pursuit, and it underscores a crucial point. Harry was right all along. The surveillance wasn't imagined. It was systematic, deliberate, and deeply intrusive, carried out by reporters like JJ, who saw nothing wrong with turning a young man's private life into public spectacle. Harry's instincts proven right, the surveillance he always sensed was real. Harry consistently felt he was under surveillance during those club outings and late nights, and as it turns out, his gut was absolutely spot on. He made public statements over the years about sensing media intrusion, about that creeping feeling that eyes were always on him, even when he couldn't see the cameras or spot the faces in the crowd. He expressed concerns about his complete lack of privacy, worries that were often dismissed or written off as paranoia by those who couldn't fathom what it was like to be hunted as a story rather than treated as a person. And now JJ's casual admission confirms what Harry knew all along. He wasn't imagining things, he wasn't being oversensitive, he was quite literally being followed and watched, his every move tracked and documented by reporters like JJ, who were tasked with turning a young man's private moments into public fodder. Harry's instincts vindicated by JJ's admission. JJ's confession proves Harry's suspicions were justified. Those nagging feelings of being watched, dismissed by so many as paranoia or self-importance, were in fact grounded in reality. The admission that JJ was specifically tasked with following Harry to clubs as a young reporter demonstrates the very real, very targeted nature of the media surveillance Harry endured. It's a stark validation. Harry's awareness was accurate, despite the skepticism he faced, despite being told he was imagining things or being dramatic. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't exaggerating. He was being followed, watched, tracked, his instincts firing correctly even when everyone around him suggested otherwise. JJ's matter-of-fact acknowledgement of this pursuit confirms what Harry always knew but struggled to have believed, that his life was under constant deliberate scrutiny, and that the media machine assigned people to monitor his movements as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The shadow side of media culture. What's particularly chilling about JJ's casual admission is how it pulls back the curtain on the aggressive, no-holds-barred tactics that defined tabloid journalism for decades. The relentless surveillance, the paparazzi camping outside clubs, the sense that someone was always watching, always waiting for a misstep. His acknowledgement that he was literally tasked with following a young Prince Harry, tracking his movements like prey, validates what Harry had been saying all along. That gut feeling of being hunted wasn't paranoia, it was reality. And this wasn't some rogue reporter going off script. This was systematic, assigned, part of the job description. It raises fundamental questions about journalistic responsibility and where, if anywhere, the boundaries should lie. Questions the tabloid industry has historically been more than happy to ignore. When does reporting cross the line into stalking? When does public interest become a convenient excuse for invasion? JJ's matter-of-fact tone about these surveillance tactics suggests an industry that had normalized behavior most people would find deeply uncomfortable, even unethical. The fact that he can admit this now, almost as trivia, speaks volumes about how detached that world became from basic standards of decency and respect for human dignity, even when the humans in question happened to be public figures. The troubling reality of royal surveillance. Confirmed JJ's casual admission that he was assigned to tail Prince Harry to nightclubs as a young reporter does more than simply validate Harry's long-held suspicions. It exposes the disturbing extent to which royal family members have been subjected to constant, invasive surveillance throughout their lives. This revelation demonstrates that the infiltration of their private movements wasn't paranoia or exaggeration, but documented fact carried out systematically by reporters who were specifically tasked with monitoring their every move. The acknowledgement raises serious questions about consent and the complete absence of ethical boundaries in reporting standards, particularly when it came to young royals who had no say in their public status and were simply trying to navigate their formative years. That Harry he was being watched and was proven correct speaks to how pervasive and intrusive this surveillance actually was, creating an environment where private citizens, regardless of their royal connection, were treated as perpetual subjects for media consumption without regard for their autonomy or basic human dignity.